2 weeks later, she came back. She said, Daddy, guess what? I got the highest in my class. I said, boys and girls? He said, yup. I don't care if you're a boy or a girl. You should be coming for that person. You need to be the best, period. And being a girl shouldn't mean that you need to take a backseat to anybody.
Period.
With a T, period. Welcome to Hockey Culture. This is the place where we try to change the culture of hockey, one interview at a time. And today, we have a very special edition with our friends from On Her Turf and one of my favorite NBC Sports teammates, Kathryn Tappen. KT, good to see you.
Good to see you too, Ace. Thanks for letting me join in here. And of course, we're joined by some amazing women that I'm super excited to be talking about here today with you guys. We've got Blake Bolden, first Black NHL pro scout and hockey player herself. We've got NWHL broadcaster Erica Ayala, who's broadcasting this amazing NWHL playoff that we will also get to do on NBC Sports later next week. And starring in that NWHL bubble is Riveters defender Saroya Tinker. So guys, it's so great to see your wonderful faces as we kick off Black History Month here. And what a week it has been. I just want to go back to last week at the White House and the inauguration of President Joe Biden, but also Vice President Kamala Harris. And what a moment. The first woman of color and first woman to serve as a vice president. We also saw Amanda Gorman, the beautiful young 22-year-old Black woman who delivered such an inspiring poem for the inauguration. And Blake, I guess I want to start with you. And after reflecting upon the week that was in our country and really just monumental throughout the world, how will what we saw and the impact of these women in office, how will that translate to some of the conversations that we're trying to have here with regards to hockey culture?
Absolutely. There's light at the end of the tunnel, right? There's positivity coming to us in the future. So it was such a beautiful thing to see. I was scrolling through social media and so many people were posting those images of their little girls watching the inauguration, and it was very inspiring. So I'm just so happy that we can look forward to this momentous push for women in politics, in power, and in our sport.
Yeah, and I mean, Saroya, along the lines of what we saw last week, I know when the NWHL playoffs kicked off, you took a knee and during the anthem, and you said something that was interesting on your social media platforms. You said, "Today I found a new love for the game." What did you mean by that?
Yeah, I definitely think that throughout my career, I've had my troubles in terms of just keeping that love up for the game, just being excluded by my teammates, not welcomed within the hockey community. But as a Riveters defenseman and as a rookie on the team, my captain and my whole team has made a huge effort in making me feel welcome. And I know that each one of them has my back. And that's definitely contributed to the love of the game for me. And I really enjoyed playing in that first game. And it was nice to finally smile and have that fun on the bench and have fun playing again.
Erica, you were there covering the games. What was going through your mind when you saw Saroya take that knee?
Well, Saroya and a lot of other players took a knee in that first weekend, those first few games. And it's something that is different from what I was expecting to see in women's hockey, which is where I spend most of my time as an analyst and journalist. But I know from Saroya's social media, Brooke Stacy and others, that there were conversations happening. And I think that's what's important for me. I know a lot of people have a difference of opinion between kneeling and not right now, and what that means if the whole team does one thing or if there's a mix here and there. But for me, what really stood out was hearing what Saroya just said and having that re-emphasized by other athletes, that there are conversations happening.
Erica, what's it been like for you? I know you were a Division I athlete at Elon playing softball, and you've covered the WNBA, but you fairly recently discovered this love for hockey, and you've just seamlessly, what seems like, transitioned to broadcasting the NWHL All-Star Weekend last year in Nashville, and so many great moments you've had a chance to do. But I'm curious how welcoming the hockey community has been to you and what the biggest difference was having come from a WNBA background to hockey.
Well, first of all, I appreciate that, Kathryn. Thank you so much. For me, it's been interesting to see as someone who's an adult and on the analyst side of things, because I'd heard a lot about And I've spoken to players like Blake and Saroya now over time and their experiences through hockey. But I can honestly say that that was not my experience and has not really been my experience in the hockey community. But the reason that I often cite for maybe that hasn't been my experience is because I've actually been able to have a lot of conversations and was introduced to hockey through not just women's hockey, but through Black women. And so spaces like Black Girl Hockey Club, or my sister who got really into hockey before me. And those are the people who introduced me to the sport. So I honestly didn't really know much else until I started talking to athletes. So for me, what that shows is that there is hope and that there are welcoming communities, but that we still need to tap into those communities a little bit more and make sure that it's known that hockey truly is for everyone.
If I could jump in and say, in my first year in the NWHL, Erica was there, and I was so excited to see her face. And as she approached me for any type of interview, I was like, yes, girl, I got you. Please ask me whatever. Let's make a connection and let's grow in this sport together. So we had a good moment in that and sharing that relationship in the end up.
So Blake, how important is representation? I mean, you're talking about Erica and the media side of things and being an analyst for the NWHL, but now you're an NHL scout and players like Saroya are coming up after you. How important is that representation for people to see you doing what you're doing in order for the next generation to aspire to get to that same level?
It's huge. I mean, we are constantly talking about if you can see it, you can be it. Representation is big, especially for me growing up. I didn't see a lot of color in the sport that I fell in love with. So to be in this space where it is predominantly dominated by white males, it's an interesting space to be in, but I'm comfortable in my trajectory in this game. And hopefully that's just blazing a trail for other women to step in my footsteps and be diverse in their particular fields.
I know for me, where I grew up, hockey, and I grew up 100 years ago, so hockey wasn't even available to girls in my area. Now it is, but there's still, Blake, to your point, there are few girls of color and there are few girls in general on a lot of these boys hockey teams if they're good enough to play on them. I mean, certainly that's where they should excel and they should be able to play together. But I'm curious how coaches and how teammates can make girls of color feel included from a very young age and feel like this is a sport that you too can participate in. You can't be afraid to come join us. Like, how can coaches help that?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of boys seeing more girls and women playing and them getting accustomed to that being a normalcy. And then coaches understanding that it is important to diversify the game and just taking a little bit extra interest. I know Saroya has talked a lot about having a coach that had interest in her, what's going on, and that tied her to the game and made her feel safe and comfortable. So those things in tandem are very important. Because back when I was playing boys hockey, there wasn't a lot of cushion for me. I got bumped up a lot and I had to pick myself back up and lean on my parents. But I think if you can attack it from every angle, it will be more success.
And Saroya, you're a part of a mentorship program. I mean, this is one of the big messages that you're trying to convey, to include others and to make this a more welcoming community. I mean, would you agree with what Blake said there? And how do you try to use that mentorship role to help advance this game right now for young girls of color?
Yeah, well, I'll go back to just talking about how coaches can help. Obviously, every player needs to be coached differently, and it really helped me for him to get to know me and get to know what I was going through in terms of the hockey community. So with that, he's the reason I really decided to play pro and move forward. And I also recognize that I'm not necessarily just playing for myself anymore. I'm playing for the little girls behind me. And with that, with my mentorship program, I love seeing the girls' faces and seeing how excited they are to live out their dreams. And they're able to see that as players like Blake and I continue to play in that game. But if you can see it, you can be it, and you can believe that you can be it. So it's so important for girls to in these positions of power and be confident in who we are and just really stick to our roots and play the game that we love.
Saroya, I went to Michigan State, so I'm not afraid to pump my green colors here. I want to ask.
Ace, it's no Yale, by the way. Sorry, pal.
No, Yale. I understand that. That's what I'm getting to next. Yale and like the Ivy League schools are seen as being elite schools. What was your experience like going to Yale as a person of color, as a Black woman there at one of those elite institutions here in the U.S.?
Yeah, I definitely think that Yale in general is an incredibly liberal place, very accepting and loving towards everyone, but that didn't necessarily happen to me when I was stepping into the ranks. For me, I had to look elsewhere for my friends and support systems. And most of my friends at Yale were regular students, non-athletes, or women of color on other teams at Yale. So definitely it's exciting to be at an elite institution like that. But for me, I definitely expected more out of my teammates in terms of their education on racism in America and through, but I also really appreciate all of the other students at Yale for being so accepting and loving within the Yale community and on campus.
And for the record, Michigan State is the Yale of the Midwest.
According to Anson Carter. According to Anson Carter, by the way. I don't know that that's written on their Wikipedia page or not, Ace, but if you want to go with it, you go ahead. Erica, I want to get back to you and the broadcasting perspective, because, you know, I get asked a lot, just being a female in a male dominated industry, which I think is a moot point at this point. I mean, there's so many amazing women doing what we do, and, you know, we're here to stay. We're not going anywhere. You said that the NWHL All-Star game last year in Nashville really energized you. And I'm curious how it energized you, but also, were you surprised at all with any upsetting moments along the path of your career? Maybe somebody who has wronged you, has maybe said you shouldn't be a part of this broadcast.
Being a part of the National Women's Hockey League in the way that I've been able to has been very unexpected. And so I've been taking every opportunity as it comes. And as Blake mentioned, she and I would have lots of conversations. I've been encouraged in so many ways by the athletes and being able to tell their story, because as you mentioned, Kathryn, I played sports and I didn't have that support that hopefully people are feeling in the women's hockey space right now. So that's why more so I'm energized, because even in my timeline as an athlete and now someone as a sports reporter, I do see some changes being made. As far as, again, I can't point to a specific moment where I felt someone was trying to tell me that I didn't belong. I honestly don't absorb that energy. I believe what my mom tells me, and she tells me I can do just about anything. So I go with mama on that. But I do know that there are people that, regardless of if they've ever heard me on a call or read any of my articles, that because I'm a woman and perhaps because of my other identifiers, that they will make assumptions. And for me, we all have shortcuts that we take in our minds, but I really focus on what I want to present as far as how I go about my work and how I go about my storytelling, and the ways that I infuse things that are important to me and that I'm hearing are important to athletes that are not always uplifted. And so if the haters are out there, I'm not really paying too much attention, because again, there's a bigger prize for me. And unfortunately, because of a lot of the other work that I've done, I'm used to resistance and having to work against that. So I'm just here and I'm ready to go. And I'm just thankful for, again, the opportunities to see other women in these spaces. So definitely like yourself, Kathryn, and seeing other people really step up, because like you said, we're here, we're not going anywhere.
Yeah. And anyone that's read your articles, I mean, knows what an incredible writer you are, an incredible journalist. Going back to you as an athlete in college, how much has being an athlete, knowing what everybody goes through as an athlete, it's certainly different at the professional level, no question, versus what, you know, the collegiate level is. And no disrespect that I was a college athlete too, but I'm very curious to get your perspective on how that's helped you be a better sports journalist, being an athlete yourself.
I hope that it helps. I think that when I go into asking questions, I try to think of how I would want to be asked a question after a loss. you're going to speak to athletes. After a win, you're going to speak to athletes. If there are big questions with a team, you're going to speak to athletes. And I still have that job to do. I think it's a matter of how you approach it. There's certain times you might want to preface your question, and there are other times when you have to read the room and know to get straight to the point and not waste the athlete's time. And so it's been gauging that I think being an athlete has helped. I think also some of the ways that I've been able to speak with athletes of color has benefited because of my experience as a Black woman playing a predominantly white sport. I played softball in the South, and I'm from New York. So there are a lot of different things, regional differences, cultural differences that I was up against. And so I reflect sometimes also on that and bringing that into the work that I do as well.
Erica, just as an analyst now covering hockey or even sports in general, are you aware, even as a Black analyst, are you aware of the differences by the way different white athletes and Black athletes are described as competitors? For example, Black athletes are always seen as being athletic and the athleticism, whereas white athletes are seen as being intellectual or gritty. Do you take that into consideration when you're calling games or describing plays, when you're trying to decide what's happening on the ice?
Absolutely. I also know that there are differences in how women are covered, whether they are the athletes or the coaches, et cetera. And I'm very conscious of that. I think that we have, as analysts especially, a responsibility to call the game as we see it. But I'm also a color commentator. And so being able to bring in storylines is what I appreciate. And so I try to think differently about the storylines that I bring in, knowing that there are a lot of stereotypes that, if we're being honest, the media don't necessarily always take the time to correct or to steer away from. And so that is something that I think about a lot. I'm covering women's sports. I am, as far as I know, one of the only Black women that is serving as an analyst. If there are others out there, hey, let's be friends. I'd love to meet you. So it does make a difference. And I just want to also go back to something, Anson, I don't know if you'll remember this, but you came to a Riveters game once, and there were people at that game that encouraged me to say hi to you. I was like, I'm good. I'm sure he's fine, but we're good. But also seeing men in the space really buck the trend of the stereotypes that we hear for not just Black athletes, but for women athletes. So I just want to make sure to bring that up. And I know that you've supported women's sports, and that's important, not just for the athletes on the ice, but for people like me as well.
Yeah, not just one game. I went to several games.
I know. That was the first game. I know. I'm not trying to say anything. I'm just talking about the first game. All right. Jeez.
I was on the ice with Erica Lawler, who we worked with at NBC Sports, and he brought me on the ice. I was holding up that Isabel Cup like I won the championship myself. So there was no shame to my game whatsoever.
Well, one of the coolest things I've had a chance to see at our Olympics and covering Team USA women's hockey team over, whether it's Sochi or most recently in South Korea, I love that the men's Team USA team is always in the stands, or the Team Canada or whoever is there. The men's team, so many members of them are cheering the females on and the women on, and I just love seeing that. Saroya, you're in a special place in that bubble right now, and you're competing for that prize Isabel Cup, and the semifinals and the finals are going to be broadcast nationally on NBC Sports for the first time ever. What does that mean to you guys, and also to the growth of the game in the United States?
Yeah, for me, it means that we're going to be seen and we're going to be heard. I think that it's about time that women's sports get broadcasted. And I'm so excited that we're going to have that chance to be able to put our talents to use and be seen. I think it's so important, and people don't know that we play at a high level and we play at that speed, and our game is enjoyable to watch. So I'm super excited for that to be televised and for people to tune in, just because I think a lot of people have a lot to learn and a lot to realize, but we're professional athletes as well, and we deserve just as much credit.
Yeah, definitely eye-opening experience. I'm going to pump Blake's tires a little bit here too, KT, because Blake loves posting those videos on Instagram or taking those slap shots. She's got one of the hardest shots I've ever seen, men or women, and the form is on point. So check out Blake's Instagram, because Her shots are just, she shoots bombs.
I know. I think Erica mentioned that in one of her articles talking about the All-Star game last year, how like incredible it was to see Blake shot. So
oh yeah, I talk about it all the time. I was like, I don't know how much I can, say here, but yeah, Blake is one of the first hockey athletes that I ever really zoned in on. Went to my first game back in Brooklyn, and I remember seeing that shot, Anson, and being like, oh, wait a minute, what is that? People are supposed to get in front of that? What is this hockey thing? And then I looked and I was like, oh snap, I think she's Black. And so Blake talks a lot about young athletes going up to her and young families of color wanting to meet her. And I always remind her that was me, like going to my first live hockey game and wanting to know who number 10 in gold was.
Oh,
and now,
thanks,
Blake,
guys.
you get a chance to kind of be in the arenas now as a pro scout for the LA Kings. And I would imagine you're going to a lot of American Hockey League games and Coast League games, and you're watching NHL players. What is it like for you sitting in those stands as a female scout in the NHL?
I can just say it's so exciting, and it's really fun to have a job where you watch your favorite sport. I've been working with the Kings for a year. It's actually been my 1-year anniversary. And obviously the pandemic slowed things down a bit. But yeah, I mostly cover the AHL season starting February 5th. So there'll be a lot of video analysis and watching those games. But our prospects are looking great. World Juniors was amazing to scout. And yeah, it's just been a blast. And our leadership has supported and helped me so much, because there was a lot for me to pick up on starting in the middle of the season last year. So it's been a whirlwind. I'm learning so much. I will continue to learn and grow in our organization. And I can say nothing but great things. It's a nice gig to have.
I'm sure you pick the brain of a lot of your male colleagues, but I'm curious what kind of questions they ask you when you're, like, what do they want to know from Blake?
They want to know my perspective, because a lot of these players, they have these biases towards, because they've seen them so many times over and over throughout the years. So for me, I'm fresh. There are people that are in the NHL that I have really never seen as much as they have, or obviously the AHL, which I cover mostly. So they'll ask me, hey, what do you think about this player? Their skating, their stick handling, their release, this and that. And in comparison to the women's game, I definitely see it completely different. The women's game is a lot of finesse and not as much hitting and checking center ice, although sometimes that happens. But you just see the game differently, and it's fun to have that perspective. And I think as an organization, you grow when there's differences and different conversations in the room.
And the Kings aren't just checking a box either. It's not just saying we're going to just hire this Black woman, have her a scout, and just check all the boxes, and everyone will be happy. I talked to Nelson Emerson and Luke Robitaille, the president of the LA Kings, and Lucky keeps telling me, we try to keep putting more and more on Blake's plate, see if she can handle more and more. And she's like a sponge, she just sucks it right up. So it's one of those things where people can't just think it's a token job here. We're going to, give Blake this job and that's it. No, it's like legit. She's working, she's grinding. She's a legitimate part of the Kings front office. It's been amazing to see and hear about.
Oh yeah, we're juggling a lot over here. We got growth and inclusion, we've got scouting, and I've got enough. We're good.
Just wait, they're gonna keep putting more and more and more on your plate over there, Blake.
It's all good. I love it.
I've heard you guys mention a couple times about Black Girl Hockey Club, and I remember, this is new. 2018 is when Black Girl Hockey Club came on the map, and I remember watching the feature on Hockey Day in America with NBC and being like, oh my gosh, that's the coolest thing ever. And now 2 years later, it's just taking off. What has Black Girl Hockey Club done for the culture and done for what we're trying to achieve here with these conversations that Anson's been a part of and that you all have been a part of in your career? I guess, Saroya, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I was introduced by Black Girl Hockey Club from my mom. My mom's white, my dad's Black. And mom found it, and she was just so excited that I was going to have a community to look to and connect with. And I've actually been fortunate enough to work with Black Girl Hockey Club since being drafted. I work with their scholarship committee, and with that, I talk a lot about educating yourself and reading and making sure that people are doing those things to further their education. And the scholarship program that we provide allows these young Black women to submit their applications with their grades and explain what hockey means to them and why they love the game and why the scholarship would mean the most to them. So I definitely enjoy going through all those applications, seeing all the lovely Black girls that play hockey and are able to continue to play with the scholarship money that we can provide them with.
I think it's amazing, Saroya, too. You mentioned your biracial upbringing. I've spoken to a couple NHL players, and one in particular doesn't really feel comfortable talking about race because he came from a biracial family. And I always tell them all the time, like, it's not how you feel, it's how you're being perceived. So I know you might feel like you've got your parents, or one parent's white or one parent's Black, but the hockey community, the hockey world is seeing you as a Black hockey player. I mean, have you ever felt any sort of question go back and forth about how you're being perceived versus how you see yourself as a person in the society?
Yeah, for sure. I think that one of the comments that I received was a teammate said, "Wow, I don't view you as Black," which was very weird to hear from me. But I think that's just the experience of being in a white hockey community. For me, I go back to the saying "one drop rule." I think that is if you're Black, I know that I'm viewed as a Black woman. People don't view me as white, so I think that it's important that we stand up for what we stand for. And I mean, the color of my skin isn't changing. So even though I come from a biracial family, I also understand both sides of it. And I know my white family members have questions, and I know that they support me. But I definitely think that it's important to engage with both sides. And I've been fortunate enough to be able to educate my white family members and improve my family community, really.
Anson, you have two beautiful daughters. How are you taking these conversations to your daughters who participate? I don't think they play hockey, do they?
They don't. They play lacrosse. They play lacrosse and soccer, and they're runners too, like you, Katie.
There you go. Well, how do you bring these conversations to your dinner table at night and to your daughters who are influenced by all of this?
I tell it like it is, and there's a story I keep telling over and over again. I had this conversation with Kendall Coyne Schofield last week about a couple years ago, excuse me. My youngest daughter Malia came home, and she said, "Daddy, you can't believe it. I did the most sit-ups in class today out of all the girls." And I was like, "Well, what about the boys?" And she was like, "Well, the boys beat me." And I kind of turned my back and I just kept it moving. And my wife was like, what are you doing? I was like, "Until you come and tell me you're the highest number of everyone in your class, then I'm not going to celebrate just being the best girl in your class, because the boys should be on your radar too." So 2 weeks later, she came back. She said, Daddy, guess what? I got the highest in my class. I said, "Boys and girls?" He said, "Yup." So we went to Chick-fil-A. We went and got milkshakes at Chick-fil-A. We're celebrating right now, because I want her to know, I don't care if you're a boy or a girl, you should be coming for that person. You need to be the best, period. And being a girl shouldn't mean that you need to take a backseat to anybody.
Period.
With a T, period.
Well, that's good to hear. I'm happy that you're, teaching them these conversations, and it's important. And I mean, I just know when we were in Detroit covering Hockey Day in America a couple of years ago, and I was covering the women's game with AJ Malesko, and I couldn't believe the amount of fans that were there. I was so excited to see, packed in the stadium, and all these little girls were watching this women's game, and the enthusiasm and the cheers, and it's just so awesome to see. And you guys not only perform well on the ice, but you back it up in the communities as well by going into these communities and celebrating the game, celebrating what you guys are worth and your confidence. I mean, Blake, I know for you, you've been on the international stage playing hockey. You're now on the national stage as a scout. You're around a lot of people. You're meeting a lot of people in the game. But how often is it that a little girl comes up to you in the stands and asks for your autograph and asks you maybe to take a picture with you?
That hasn't happened while I've been scouting. I'm kind of incognito. But while I was playing it was one of the more amazing things that I've ever experienced in my playing career. And the reason why I kept playing, honestly, it was something that was very fulfilling. I always knew that I wanted to push the game further for people of my race and my gender. And that was it for me. And seeing those little girls meant the world to me. And I actually someone sent me a video of their white daughter looking at the USA Hockey magazine saying, "Mommy, that's me." And she was just seeing a Black woman saying that's her. So for me, that's huge because it didn't matter what color skin I was. I was just a woman and she was proud of that. And she felt as though she could be on the cover too. So those things for me are just top. It's amazing to see.
How hard is it for you all to deal with the social media impact? And there's so much positivity, and we hear from all of us hear from our fans who love what we do. They're encouraging, but there's also some haters on there. And I worry about the younger female generation. I worry about my nieces and my goddaughters and what they have to see with regards to perception of females and with regards to who they're following and who they're liking and this false image that can be out there at times. What is and I'd like to get all three of your perspectives on this, but your advice with dealing with social media as a young woman, hockey player, baseball player, lacrosse player, like Anson's daughters, whatever they may be, to try and encourage them to kind of quiet that noise. It's very hard for young girls. I guess, Erica, why don't I start with you, and then maybe Blake and Saroya, you can finish it off.
Yeah, I jokingly mentioned, I listen to what my mom says and not much else, but I think that comes from just that my mother, and I'm one of 3 daughters, so I have 2 sisters. Hi, Alexis and Jessica. But I have 2 sisters. And so my mother basically raised us as a single mom, and she instilled that in us to really focus on whatever your North Compass is, your North Star. And she also said, hey, even if I tell you something, if it doesn't sit right with your spirit, then, figure that out, take the time to figure that out. And that's kind of how I approach social media and how I go about buffering my thoughts and feelings that I might have when I'm not on camera, and then how I present. And that's not because I believe in censoring myself or my thoughts. It's more so because I realize now that, especially as someone in the media, that there's an opportunity to bring people along into a conversation. And it's hard to do that when a lot of the reactions on social media are negative or shutting someone down that they don't agree with. And so what I also do, and advice I would definitely give, is find your circle, whether it's your mom, your sisters, or a group of friends, and filter your thoughts there first. And then if you would engage on social media, especially with what people consider difficult conversations, talking about equity, race equity, gender equity, which, we see a lot as women in this space having to justify our place or the place of women. So that's what I would do. Know your worth, know who you are and what you stand for, and filter your thoughts through and come in a cool, calm, and collected way as much as possible when you are public facing or on social media.
Yeah, I echo everything that Erica has said. That was perfectly said, but I've gotten tons of negative feedback, comments on the things that I stand for. I'm sure we all have, right? It doesn't matter who is on this call right now, but everybody gets that, and it's just how you respond to it, I think, is the most important thing. I was always just told never read the comments, and if you really do want to go down that road, just take a deep breath, and your response is more important than anything else. And if you do know who you are internally, I think that is the best bet for you to move forward in whatever you feel like you have to say in response. So for me, just take a moment and check yourself before you interject into the conversation.
Yeah, I think for me, obviously we know haters are going to hate. And I think for me, when I was first drafted, I was receiving a lot of hate comments and things like that. And I was kind of rattled by them, but I eventually realized that I have to be unapologetically me. For me, I think it's just so important for these young women to be unapologetically themselves and know what they stand for, and know that people are going to hate no matter what. It's very easy to ignore the negativity when you receive twice as much positive feedback. So I definitely think that for me, I know before I go to bed, I don't engage with any of the negative social media, but often go through my mentions and see all the positive things people are saying. So it's much easier to focus on the positive side.
And I'm going through it right now too with a 9th grader and a 7th grader. We have these conversations all the time, and it's very rare that I post stuff with my kids on social media. But the one time I did is when I made that video about George Floyd, and I included a lot of different people in the hockey community. And the reason why I included them is because I didn't want to have to ask NHL guys, Commissioner Bettman, Executive Director Dom Thier, Blake. I didn't want to ask people I knew in the hockey community to participate in something that I wouldn't ask my kids to do themselves. So that's why it was important that I had them included in the video. But I let them know too, there might be some people that don't agree with what you're saying, but that's okay too. As long as you have your circle, I think that's what you guys are all talking about, as long as you have your circle around you that love you and believe in what you're doing and who you are as a person, at the end of the day, that's all that really matters.
Yeah, I think Erica nailed it there with the circle. There's no question about that. You got to keep everybody close, and that circle is so important of positivity, and to continue for all of us to do these conversations and to keep this great message going, block out the noise, and continue to talk about great stuff. So it's been such an honor to talk to all three of you. Anson, I get to talk to you a lot, but it's been an honor being on your hockey culture here today and representing the On Her Turf brand, which certainly means a lot to us at NBC Sports and has really taken off to try and bring that positive encouragement of athletes and younger women who are looking to get into any one of our professions. But Saroya, best of luck in that bubble in Lake Placid.
Let's go.
Super excited
71.
for you and your teammates, and Erica broadcasting it, and Blake, continue to do the great work that you're doing with the LA Kings. Best of luck to you in that role too. Thank you guys.
Thank
Thank you.